someone, and I'm going to get to that later. But today, I'm going to talk to you about the differences in emotional amnesia experienced by OSDD-1b systems and dissociation and depersonalization experienced in DPDR, or Depersonalization Derealization Disorder. If you follow us on other social media or happen to know us in real life, you'll know that we are getting more and more open about being a system. So this whole video started last semester when we met a professor who has DPDR. And we spent many hours after class talking about the differences between what we experience and what she experiences, and going over the nitty-gritty of how does this really differentiate from each other? How do we experience dissociation and depersonalization and partial amnesia differently from each other? And through comparing our experiences, I'm going to bring you this video where I'm going to talk about what we ended up with and what we concluded from talking about our experiences. So to start off with, what is DPDR, Depersonalization Derealization Disorder? It quite literally is what it sounds like. DPDR is when you have a recurring experience of depersonalization or derealization. Derealization is when you feel pretty much fine, but the world around you feels unreal. It feels not right. Things look out of place, things are happening too fast, time isn't logging correctly with you, different objects look different colors, or maybe the world feels weird and fuzzy, or you feel like you're moving through it slowly like molasses. There's a whole subset of experiences that are, this world feels unreal to me. A key part of DPDR is the statement that it doesn't feel real. You'll often get statements from people with DPDR about like, I know that this chair is real, but it doesn't feel that way. And that's where you have the key distinction between DPDR and schizophrenia, where with schizophrenia, a delusion is believing that it is that way, where with DPDR, you know something's wrong, but you also know that it doesn't feel like what you know should be right. Depersonalization is when the world feels fine, but you don't feel real. You can look at your hands and be like, these aren't my hands, I don't feel real, I don't exist, who am I don't feel like the same person I was 5 minutes ago, and especially that line, I don't feel like I'm the same person that I was, is what we talked a lot about with our professor. And what we ended up concluding, I think, is really important. And the way I boiled it down to is that depersonalization and DPDR goes one way, whereas emotional amnesia and partial amnesia is a two-way experience in OSDD-1b systems. So to get into what I mean by that, when the person I was talking to described depersonalization to us, I'm going to give her a name, say Sally. She said that when she was dissociated, when she was depersonalized, she felt like she was not the same person as before. She said something to us like, I feel like Sally is a completely different person. I'm not that person, I'm not interested in the things she's interested in, and I don't know why, but we're not the same. But then she continued to elaborate and said, after she got out of her depersonalization episode and once she stopped dissociating, she looked back on that experience of when she was dissociating and she felt like that was herself. She went, oh yeah, that was just me, I was just dissociating. And it registered to her like that. So that's what I would call one way. When you're in the moment and when you're dissociating, you feel depersonalized towards yourself, but when you're not in the moment and you're grounded, you don't feel depersonalized towards the self that was feeling just depersonalized towards you. But it's different when it comes to emotional amnesia and partial amnesia. I'm going to use Lily and Lorianne as an example. So let's set up a timeline of experiences. The first experience is when Lorianne is fronting. It all goes well, Lorianne feels like herself, she is grounded and connected to that moment. Next, there's a switch, and Lily is fronting. Lily feels depersonalized towards Lorianne. Lily feels like whatever happened while Lorianne was fronting wasn't something that Lily did. Lily didn't feel like she's the same person as Lorianne. Lily doesn't feel like anything Lorianne is interested in is something Lily is interested in. At this point, it's pretty much exactly the same to the DPDR experience. But then, what happens is Lorianne fronts again. And this is where it gets different, because when Lorianne fronts again, Lorianne is depersonalized to Lily. Lorianne feels the exact same thing in relation to Lily as Lily feels to Lorianne when Lorianne fronted the first time. And because this dissociation and depersonalization is two ways, so Lorianne to Lily, and then Lily also back to Lorianne, it's fundamentally different than what someone with DPDR experiences. If we go back over what someone with DPDR would experience in this exact same situation, at first they would be not dissociated, and they'd be living their life, having a good time, and then they would dissociate and depersonalize, and they would feel disconnected from when they were grounded. So they'd feel like, oh, that's not me, that's not the same person, I didn't do that, I'm not interested in those things, we are two different people. But when they ground again after that, and they're grounded again, they don't have that same reaction towards when they were dissociated and when they were depersonalized. They go, oh, that was me too. I was just dissociated. This is me. I still hold the same interests as when I was dissociated. I relate to the actions I took and the reactions that I had when I was dissociated. And I'm still me from here before. So all three of these are the same person. And when they're grounded, they fully realize that and they connect that and they feel that as true. That's the fundamental difference when we talk about one-way depersonalization versus two-way depersonalization, or emotional or partial amnesia. Furthermore, we can expand this metaphor a little bit more so you understand it better with three different alters. I'm going to use Lorianne, Lily, and Rose. This is going to be a little bit more of a longer time span. So let's say Lorianne starts off fronting. Lorianne feels fine, she feels grounded, she feels connected to herself. Lily starts fronting, the exact same thing happens. Lily feels dissociated to Lorianne's memories, doesn't feel like it was her, feels like it was someone else entirely, doesn't feel like the same person, is depersonalized. Then, Rose fronts after Lily. Rose feels depersonalized not only to Lily's memories, but also to Lorianne's memories. So Rose feels depersonalized to both of Lily and Lorianne's experiences. Then, let's say Lorianne fronts again. Lorianne will connect to her first memory all the way over here, but will not connect to Lily or Rose's memories. And let's say Rose fronts again, Rose will connect to her memory, but not Lorianne, Lily's, or Lorianne's. So Rose has her own set of memories. And from this example, what happens with OSDD-1b is each alter forms their own narrative thread of experience. So Rose remembers what Rose did and doesn't feel depersonalized to Rose's experiences. And Lily doesn't feel depersonalized to Lily's experiences, but feels depersonalized to Rose's experiences and Lorianne's experience. From this, each alter feels depersonalized to each other. It's a two-way experience, and it's a three-way experience, and a four-way, and a five-way, to whatever amount of alters you have in your system. And this is what really fundamentally gives rise to the differences in alters experiences. This is why we feel like different people, because we have different narrative experiences of what memories are ours, what feels like us, what things we're interested in. We feel like different people because we have emotional and partial amnesia against one another. And from there, another thing that I want to point out is that this isn't always easy to figure out. It's not always easy to figure out when there's two different narrative threads of experiences that are dissociated against each other, instead of, oh, that was just me and I was dissociating and it's fine. Picking out the narrative threads of your life and realizing that they have emotional amnesia against each other is a very tricky process, and one that can come with a lot of pitfalls, and one that you might not realize is happening right away. And this is especially true when someone is in denial about their own system. I think almost every system I've talked to has had some flavor of experience where you're fronting as an individual alter and you think that some other alter that fronted recently that you feel depersonalized against, you say, oh yeah, that was just me anyways. Or you as an alter front and you think that you are a different alter. Camilla from the Alexandrite system put this wonderfully, and I'm going to read a quote from her here. I was discussing this with a therapist, but my thoughts were that it can be hard to differentiate yourself. Even if there's some almost like body knowledge now that you're a system, it can be hard to wake up and realize you're in the matrix. It's like if you don't know that you are you pick someone else to be. I thought I was Sandra or Dice for a long time. Claudia thought she was Ellen or Sandra. Dice thought they were Sandra and Claudia. It goes on. Basically, the reason they may feel like that is because they might actually be finding out that they have DID. We've had this happen in our system countless times. Amber, when she first came forward, Amber thought that she was Lorianne, until she really sat down and went, wait a second, I don't really feel like the same person as Lorianne. And I think this is a process that's never quite done. We haven't really talked about this on the channel yet, and I feel like it will be a little while before we address it in whole, but we found out recently, and we came to the realization recently, that there's about 5 alters who are considering themselves to be silver. This means that there's been about 5 alters who've been actively engaged in our life as a host, who's been actively engaged in our relationship, and it sounds like kind of a scary thing to realize, but it's been really helpful for us, and we felt a lot better since realizing it, and since starting to work through the process of figuring out who we are and figuring out the differences between us. In our experience, the difference between having DPDR and being in denial about the fact that you're a system and that there's more alters is that you're actively ignoring signs that point towards being a system. When I didn't know that there was 5 people actively involved in being silver, I would look back on the memories of someone else and convince myself, oh yes, it's fine, those are my memories, I feel like that, it's fine, totally fine, nothing's going on here, nothing's weird at all. For us, it's been just wonderful to finally have a whole bunch of things that we've been ignoring for months and months and months and blatantly just shoving to the side and being, oh, like, whatever, I'll deal with that later, have all those things finally click into place and make sense, because there's more of us than we thought, and that's okay. Right now, we haven't really focused on names or favorite colors or any of that stuff. With our therapist, we're just focusing on logging when we switch and keeping note of what memories feel like which and picking out the little narrative threads of our existence. And we've picked out 5 narrative threads of existence out of who we all thought was Silver. And there still is someone who I think is going to keep calling themselves Silver. But it's a developing experience and it's a developing journey, and it's a very interesting one, especially for us. And I think for us, it's definitely tied into our past about not really accepting how we were a system in the way we were. If you look into our Accepting We Were a System video, it'll talk a lot more about that. But overall, it's been such a lovely experience to finally recognize what's been going on with us. So anyone who's struggling with this, I send you a whole bunch of love. It's a really rough and tricky thing to try to figure out the differences between dissociation and emotional amnesia, and it takes a lot of love to really open yourself up to those possibilities. So I'm wishing you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!